Hi, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. I'm Pamela Price, your host. This is the place and the space for real talk. This podcast is all about raw, unfiltered conversations on law, politics, culture, education, systemic racism, and current events shaping our world. We'll go beyond the headlines to dive deep into how some of our most pressing issues impact real people, real families, and our community. My goal is to help you navigate the complexities of today's world. We'll hear from community leaders, activists, lawyers, educators, healers, and everyday people on the front lines of change. Each episode will tackle an issue, breaking it down in a way that's honest, informative, and actionable. For those tuning in for the first time, I'm Pamela Price, a longtime attorney, political activist, and champion for justice. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel to watch the show and to my Substack to read the weekly word. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered, and you can listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. Today, I'm honored to welcome a powerhouse in the fight for justice, Kat Brooks, a lifelong activist, organizer, and artist. Kat has dedicated her life to dismantling systemic oppression and building community driven solutions. Raised in a working class union family, she learned resilience from her mother, a leader in the domestic violence movement, and strength from her father, the first Black stagehand in IATSE Local 720. Her personal experiences with state violence and injustice ignited a lifelong commitment to advocacy. As the co founder of the Anti Police Terror Project and executive director of the Justice Teams Network, Kat has been instrumental in advancing policies that challenge police violence and build alternatives to the carceral state. She helped lead the fight for AB 392, which changed California's use of force laws for the first time in 150 years and launched Mental Health First, a non police response to mental health crises. Beyond activism, Kat is an award winning playwright, actress, and host of Law and Disorder on KPFA, using storytelling to amplify movements for change. Whether in the streets, the halls of power, or on the stage, she brings relentless tenacity, compassionate grace, and a vision for true justice. Let's dive into this conversation with Kat Brooks. Welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered, Kat.
Thank you. Thank you, Pam. I don't know if it happens to you when your people send over the bio and you're like, huh, who wrote that?
Right. People write nice things about you, and they're usually true.
I guess. That was very nice.
Yes. Well, we wanted to make sure we give you your flowers and your props
Well, I
as you
appreciate
start
it.
to, help folks understand what's happening right now. And I wanted to have you come and talk to my audience from a historical comparative lens. We both ran in 2018 and we had our goals then, and now it's 2025. And, we see such a huge difference, I see, in the way that the politics is rolling out and the level of racism, disrespect, just obviously the money and all of that. So I want to get your perspective. I mean, what's different? What's happening now that we never saw happening in 2018?
And I don't think we can say never, Pamela. I mean, I think that we were the targets. I mean, white people have been coming for me since 2009, and you not much different. And
Mm,
the folks, the way that the media even talked about us or engaged us or didn't engage us, right, as if we didn't even have the right to be inside of the race. And politics then were pretty nasty. I mean, something I haven't talked about a lot is that during that race, Libby got video from the police of a not so great moment of mine on my wedding night that they were threatening to release and try to use that to get me to shut up and sit down. And I was like, I don't care.
mm,
Put it out there, right? I'm a person. But it's a different level of nasty, and it's laced with tinges of violence
right.
that people have said is okay. There is a particular political operative with a black face who has threatened my life, threatened the council member's life. I don't know if he's threatened your life. Um,
Probably.
who poses, right, with illegal
Hmm.
firearms, who I know has brandished such firearms on Zoom calls with housing workers, who happens to be really, really good friends with Lauren Taylor. And that's who Lauren rocks with. And people have said, well, I guess that's okay because this is our candidate. And that is a big part that's different. And then the other thing that I think is really different, Pamela, and this is where I think that we haven't figured out quite what to do about it yet, and that is that social media platforms have become the place where people get their news, where
Right.
people get right their facts,
Right.
right? And the right has done such a great job in its intentional and strategic of creating an echo chamber on these social media platforms that it literally becomes the headlines that we're reading in our papers the next
Right.
day. And you having an argument with somebody next door about something that that dude said that you know isn't true, but because
Mhm.
30,000 people retweeted it, well, that must be fact and you must be full of it. And that is a dynamic that we did not have in 2018 and then we haven't figured out how to get ahead of. And part of that's because the left is too busy fighting each other and eating itself instead of creating our own echo chambers and unifying to create to implement an effective pushback strategy.
Right. And the 30,000 people in that echo chamber, half of them are not really people, right? They're bots.
Right.
And so, right, people see what a bot says and they think that's for real.
Yep.
And, one of the more devastating echo chambers is next door, where people go to just find, I lost my cat, right? Or I need a painter or a contractor at my house. But it has become riddled with this really racist conversation that's just repeated over and over again. Not that it probably had that all the time, but it's certainly been amplified. And you're right, it comes from these crazy platforms into the public sphere, and people do. They think this is what is it's reality. The main difference I see is the influence of the MAGA movement, and that is just openly on all social media platforms, but in the streets, in conversations. How do you see the MAGA folks actually, and this open willingness really to have white supremacists in your camp, right? For politicians, how do you see that impacting our community?
I mean, I first of all, they not new. They just got permission to slither out from underneath their rocks and be themselves,
Mhm.
right? Like that's what I want us all. This is America. This is who America has always been. It's just America in our faces, right? And I think the other thing that we need to be clear about is that there's different sectors inside of what we have this overarching umbrella of MAGA over, right? Because we think of MAGA, we're thinking about like Trump and his followers. But inside of that are a whole bunch of people that don't agree, right? So, like the Oath Keepers don't necessarily agree with the Proud Boys, don't necessarily agree with the Libertarians, don't necessarily agree with this new face of fascism, which is black and brown faces, particularly of
Mhm.
young men. Right? They don't all align on strategy or even political ideology. What they do align on is the kind of world that they want to see, right? Where capital reigns supreme, all
Yes.
us woke people are buried, right? And they take out what they consider the trash, which are the people, Pamela, that you and I get up and fight so hard to serve every single day, right? There's a very particular vision of the world that they're fighting for, and they have combined their forces to fight for that world together. And they are unabashed about utilizing violence or inciting violence to get us there. And I think we're just at the very beginning of of the violence that is to come.
Well, I think that the violence we saw on January 6th
I mean,
is just going to start to be replicated at the local level. Now, especially now that those folks who had the gumption to travel to Washington, D.C. to overthrow the government, now they're back home and they've been pardoned and told it's okay. You did a good thing. Keep on keeping on, right? That's the danger and the difference that I see now. And we even have yeah, you're right. They've been there. These are the children of the folks that we saw on television when I was a little girl with the dogs and the fire hoses. And these are the folks that were lynching people unrestrained in this country for centuries. They're still here, and their children are very active in our political sphere, but they've been given the okay to do that. Part of giving them the okay to do that has been the rise of the oligarchy in Oakland. We have Philip Dreyfus spent $1.7 $1 million on local elections through these 3 PACs. He spent $850,000 on through some other PACs to the local political races through foundational Oakland Unites. And, this real estate and the tech brothers coming into Oakland is just unprecedented. They have flooded it. And as one guest said, they couldn't buy elections, but they could buy recalls. But that does not mean they're going to stop. And we see that. I think we're going to continue to see that. So how do you think that's impacting our politics and our community?
I mean, as I said, I think shortly after the recalls passed, I said, well, there you have it. You hear that cha-ching? That is the sound of Oakland's political, cultural, and social fabric being bought and paid for.
Yeah.
That's what happened, and there was not a damn thing that anybody could do about it because there were no laws to prevent Dreyfus from doing what he did. And again, though, his efforts were emboldened or exacerbated or strengthened by the echo chamber of right-wing talking points and fear-mongering while the right exploited the conditions of our communities, right, to beat you, quite frankly, over the head with it for things that existed and were created under the Libby Schaaf administration and Nancy O'Malley that just got exacerbated by COVID and we were still dealing with that you all were actually trying to get to the beginnings of cleaning up.
Right.
So it was intentional, it was strategic, it was tactical. I mean, from an organizing strategy, I'm like, I mean, they sort of crossed all their I's and crossed all their T's and dotted all their I's. And again, a fractured left allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
And to be clear, that Oakland is a test case. We're the vanguard around these issues for the entire country. The country has been engaged in 15 years of resisting state terror because Oakland kicked that off and Oakland has sustained it. So if they could pull what they just pulled here in Oakland, trust and believe, right now, they're farming that out all over the country. Watch what happens with these midterms, this next set of midterms coming up. It's going to be a whole new game out there.
Right. Watch what happens in Contra Costa County with the recall of Dinah Becton.
I just saw that.
Next up, they're moving right along. So I appreciate that the left is fractured and there's no truer statement. I do want to also acknowledge that during COVID in May of 2020, you did something. You convened an impressive group of Black leaders in Oakland and issued the new Black Deal. Talked about a Black agenda. And you identified 4 areas of immediate need: testing, housing, incarceration, and education. And one of the concerns that I've heard expressed in the current election cycle, we got Barbara Lee, the Honorable Barbara Lee, and Lauren Taylor, leading mayoral candidates. We're going to have a Black mayor, either one of them, right? And so the question is, what are they prepared to do about the issues particularly impacting Black people in Oakland? Have you gotten any insight on that?
Okay, so now I just, for legal purposes, I need to say that I'm speaking as Cat Brooks, the individual, and not at all having anything to do with APTP.
Okay. Yes.
So,
Understood.
so going back to what you said about the Black New Deal. So first of all, it was myself, Terha Ak, and now Councilwoman Fife, that convened 50 or more, right, Black folks that said, listen, COVID is coming. Things that are dire are going to become disastrous, and this is what you need to do, and here's a roadmap to do it. And we brought that into City Council, and we were laughed out of chambers by Lynette McElhaney and Lauren Taylor. And the two of them ganged up on then council member Nikki Bass, who was the only one that would take our meetings, for the audacity that she had to be a non-Black person bringing forward a Black agenda. And then Lauren Taylor told us that he had it covered and they had a plan and things would be fine. Well, they did not have a plan and things were not fine and things are not fine. And so that's part of the audacity then for Lauren Taylor to turn around and talk about how bad the conditions are when he is directly responsible for helping to create those conditions, makes my head explode a little bit. The second thing that I would say is I have a saying, and that is, to be Black is necessary. It is not necessarily sufficient. We got all kinds of Black people running around in all kinds of powerful positions that don't do anything for Black people. And I know former Congresswoman Lee from her work. We've been in same rooms. I think that she has a human agenda with an equitable lens. If that makes sense. And by equitable is not equal. It does not mean that we all get the same. It means that equitable, right? That those folks that are in the most need get the most of. That is my belief about her politics. I don't know that there's any elected official in Oakland now that would say, right, that they have a black agenda. I don't know that anybody would come out and say that. I think if I was managing someone's campaign and they came out and said, I would tell them to shut up. That's something that I would say. You know what I mean? But I'm of a particular bent, and I do think that given the values that both of those candidates have expressed along their political career trajectories, that we can tell who is going to stand for the marginalized and who is going to stand for the developers.
Mhm. Well said. So, assuming, and you've kind of covered this, if we have a black mayor and a majority black city council, will Oaklanders be better off?
Just because the body is black,
Thank you. Something I would say, but I'm not going to say it right now. Thank you. I do want to say that the issues when you talk about black folks in Oakland, we know, and it impacts all people, but the disparities in terms of homelessness and our unhoused population, the disparities in terms of police racial profiling and misconduct, the gentrification issues where black Oakland is rapidly disappearing, the disparity in street services. Those of us in East Oakland got more potholes than anybody else, and we don't get the grass and the weeds cut down like everybody else. The disparity between in public safety between police and fire. The fire stations recently closed in East Oakland, where we have as much, if not greater, danger of fire risk than any other part of the Oakland Hills. The disparities with Oakland Unified School District between public versus charter schools, the economic development opportunities that are not widely known and greatly appreciated and tallied about and boasted about, like the West Oakland 7th Street Thrives effort, the East Oakland, the development of the Coliseum by the African American Sports and Entertainment Group, and Oakland Exchange, where the black NBA players have promised they're going to invest millions of dollars in Oakland to lift up black businesses and provide economic opportunity and improve our community. And as you said, the vicarious trauma that black folks in this community have is just overwhelming. From over policing, from economic disparities and mass incarceration and the generational impacts that I saw up close and personal of mass incarceration. Those are the things that are on the table, hopefully, for the new mayor and new leadership in Oakland as we move forward. So, Kat, I'm going to let you go. I know you have many other things to do, but thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks for taking the time, making the time to share with us your views, which are so important in the dialogue as we move to reshape the narrative about what public safety really is and what it requires and what we need to put Oakland on the right foot and moving forward. Thank you so much for coming to Pamela Price Unfiltered.
My pleasure, Pamela. You take care.
Welcome to Legally Speaking. Let's talk about how difficult it is to prosecute police officers in California. Nationally, there's a lot of conversation about qualified immunity, but qualified immunity is a civil law doctrine. It does not apply to criminal cases. In 2019, the California legislature passed a landmark bill, Assembly Bill 392, which redefined the standards for the use of deadly force by police in California. It permits deadly force only when necessary to defend against an imminent threat of death or to prevent serious bodily injury to the officer or another person. The necessity standard requires officers to thoroughly evaluate situations and consider alternatives to force, such as verbal warnings or the use of non lethal methods. The law emphasizes de escalation tactics and requires the officer to exhaust all reasonable alternatives before resorting to deadly force. The goal is to minimize harm and preserve life. The law still relies upon the totality of the circumstances standard, which means all facts known to the officer at the time and now includes the conduct of the officer and the person who's subjected to the force leading up to the use of deadly force. Let us be clear. Given the inherent risk of working in law enforcement, police officers are legally entitled to use force, including physical restraints, tasers, non lethal, blunt force objects like batons, and then guns. They can use lethal force or any type of force when they deem it necessary to restore safety, make an arrest, or protect themselves or others from harm. Whether the force is excessive or unreasonable depends on the totality of the circumstances. There is no universal set of rules governing when or how police officers should use force. It's important to know, do not resist or interfere with a police officer unless you are prepared to possibly get hurt and or go to jail. In most circumstances, civilians who are not trained like police officers simply do not know the totality of the circumstances. Therefore, you're at a disadvantage when you are trying to second guess a police officer. What are the challenges for those who are trained and responsible to prosecute rogue cops? Number one, the blue wall, which is the internal shield. Most often, the police are working together to justify the action from the start. The normal safeguards in any criminal investigation are not always followed, like segregating witnesses or preserving evidence such as dash cam or body cam video. You have to fight to get the documents necessary to even start the investigation. The penal code has an exception for DAs under the law, but most police agencies will still fight it. Number three, the prosecution cannot rely upon internal interviews. Administrative investigative statements are protected by law. In Liebarger versus City of Los Angeles, the California Supreme Court confirmed that any statement made under the threat of discipline or compelled by the employer cannot be used in any later criminal prosecution by the DA. That's a potential landmine for district attorneys. Documents have to be scrubbed before they can be reviewed. You should have a filter team to review the documents before you can actually start your investigation. That takes time and resources. Sometimes tens of thousands of documents have to be reviewed, and it includes body cam and dash cam video. That might take 3 or 4 lawyers to filter the documents. In Alameda County, we had to create that infrastructure, which did not exist. Number 4, you need a probable cause declaration. That's required to get a warrant. You need an inspector willing to sign a probable cause declaration. Most DA inspectors are not willing to sign off on prosecuting another cop. There's an exception for a neutral district attorney. But again, most district attorneys are not willing to sign off on a probable cause declaration. You need an inspector willing to do the investigation. It's nearly impossible to get an inspector to do it. That role is rife with potential conflicts of interest. OPD officers hired as DA inspectors often were assigned to investigate OPD. We had to hire new inspectors in the Alameda County DA's office who were not reluctant or potentially biased to conduct these type of investigations. And justice warriors show up when it's a police officer. DAs and DA inspectors become super committed to the reasonable doubt standards in ways that they never show up for everyday people. And courts are complicit. A judge has to approve and sign off on a warrant to arrest a peace officer. The warrant and the probable cause declaration are subject to extra special scrutiny when it's a police officer. And when they are charged, police officers are not held to the same custody standards. They are rarely held in custody. Their mobility will generally not be restricted. They can continue to travel, go out of state, leave the country. In Alameda County, we had real-life examples of judicial resistance to police accountability. One case was the case of Officer Fong Tran. He was a veteran Oakland police officer who faces felony charges of perjury, bribery, and witness intimidation based on his handling of a murder case. According to an investigation by Oakland's side, his internal affairs file revealed that unrecorded cash payments to witnesses have been allowed at OPD for years. But in the Tran case, the court attacked the DA inspector to stop the case from moving forward. The court, on its own, raised a grammatical error in the inspector's probable cause declaration as a defense to the charges. Another situation was that involving Stephen Taylor's murder. San Leandro police officer Jason Fletcher shot and killed Stephen Taylor in a Walmart on a Saturday afternoon. My predecessor, Nancy O'Malley, charged him under Penal Code Section 1385 as modified by Assembly Bill 392. There was no evidence that shooting Stephen Taylor was necessary to defend against an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury to the officer or another person. But instead of focusing on the case, the court relied upon photographs of me with the victim's grandmother to justify recusing the entire DA's office. That case is now languishing as we mark the 5th year of Stephen Taylor's death, and the new DA has fired or reassigned all of the lawyers working on the case. Butch Ford, a former prosecutor assigned to prosecute Officer Fletcher for killing Stephen Taylor, who provided evidence to the defense to help block the prosecution of defendant Fletcher while he was still on the DA payroll. His declaration to support defendant Jason Fletcher's defense showed how corrupt the good old boy network in Alameda County really is. This was unprecedented, groundbreaking interference with the prosecution. But the court was more concerned about the prosecutor's intent in pursuing the case versus the clearly unethical behavior of the former prosecutor. The court and many of the prosecutors in our office treated Butch Ford like he was a hero. Why? Because he was leading the effort to overturn the November 2022 election that swept me into office. Once again, another instance where politics clearly trumped public safety in Alameda County. Let's move on to correct the record. One of the biggest frustrations of Oaklanders in 2023 was rising crime. Businesses were being broken into. Bipping was pervasive across the city. Police response times were horrible and getting worse every day. And the media was constantly trashing Oakland as unlivable. Fear, fear, doom, and gloom. In 2024, crime was going down and bipping declined, but businesses were still being broken into. The police response time still sucked, and the police unions were now openly attacking me, and the media was still trash talking about Oakland. In 2025, crime is rising, bipping is back, more businesses are being broken into, the police seem lost without a cause, and the media has gone strangely silent about the connection between the DA and crime in Oakland. So the question is, was it really about crime, or was it a political takeover of the oligarchy in Oakland? Which brings me to Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation's blueprint for a conservative administration, now known as the Trump administration. Project 2025 proposed that the Department of Justice charge local elected prosecutors or otherwise intervene in cases that have, quote, rule of law deficiencies, close quote, meaning decisions or policies that they perceive do not follow the letter of the law, like declining to prosecute low-level offenses like marijuana possession or first-time shoplifting cases, or not charging every juvenile as an adult, or not adding gang enhancements to every crime, or not charging life without the possibility of parole or even death penalty. Project 2025 proposed that the DOJ should remove local prosecutors who, quote, refuse to prosecute criminal offenses in their jurisdictions, close quote. Project 2025 called for the DOJ to, quote, restore law and order, close quote, in jurisdictions that supposedly have a crime problem because of the local policies of the DA. Now that we have achieved the goals of Project 2025 in Alameda County, is anyone wondering why the media is no longer interested in what's happening in the DA's office? One reason is that Black women are not interchangeable. I was part of a movement of progressive prosecutors targeted by Project 2025. The difference between a progressive prosecutor and the traditional prosecutor is number one, a commitment to addressing racial disparities. Number two, a commitment to dramatically funding reentry services. Number three, a commitment to reimagining youth justice. Number four, a commitment to police accountability. Number five, disengaging from past practices and policies that feed mass incarceration and support white supremacy. Number six, recognizing the harms and inequities of our criminal justice system and thinking creatively about how to right the wrongs of yesterday. Number seven, looking back and being committed to undoing the harm of your predecessors. Number eight, leading the conversation with law enforcement about how to disengage from policies and practices that feed mass incarceration and support white supremacy. If you don't see these commitments being manifested in your criminal justice system by your local DA, then perhaps you too are living in the visionary era of Project 2025. Thank you for tuning in to Pamela Price Unfiltered. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel to watch the show and to my Substack to read the weekly word. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered. And you can listen to this podcast wherever you listen to your podcast.